I'm here. Tell you what, Ed, I'll go ahead and let's get this train out of the station.
Yes.
All right.
All right. Thanks everybody for joining tonight. This is the first event we've ever done other than when we got together locally. I first appreciate your time coming. I'm more appreciative for Ed being able to get our first presentation. Much better than a bunch of guys rag chewing on an evening. So I'd like to, based on Ed's having a little audio difficulty, I'm going to do this very quickly. I'm going to leave out some things. I do apologize, Mr. Jew, but I just want to get this floor to you as soon as possible. Martin F. Jew was born in Vicksburg to a Chinese American family, and whose great-grandfather helped build the Transcontinental Railroad across America in the late 1860s. He grew up in the small Mississippi Delta town of Hollandale, Mississippi. He's the owner, the founder of MFJ Enterprises, which I've had the pleasure to drive through Starkville, Mississippi back in the 90s and see buildings and buildings. And I never, unfortunately, had my ticket at the time to realize what opportunity I just drove past. So I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to mute myself as long with everyone else's microphones for Mr. Martin F. Jew. Thanks for coming. The floor is yours, sir.
Well, thank you very much, David. That was very nice, and I appreciate y'all inviting me to speak to such a prestigious group in Virginia. That what I thought I would talk a little bit about are the early days, the very early days of MFJ. Whenever I go out of town, there's always somebody who asks me, "Where are you from?" And I'm always so happy to tell them I'm from Starkville, Mississippi. And then they say, no, where are you really from? Well, I know they're never going to believe it. I really am from Mississippi. So I just look at them and tell them, well, can't you tell from my accent that I'm from Southern China? Well, like David said, I was born in Vicksburg, Mississippi, and I grew up in a little delta town called Hollandale. That's near the Mississippi River. It was a little farming town, about 2,500 people. And my great-grandfather helped build a transcontinental railroad back in the late 1860s. He went back to China, and he stayed in China, but my grandfather and father both had little grocery stores in the Mississippi Delta, and they're both buried in Memphis. The Mississippi Delta is a region that starts at Memphis, Tennessee, and it goes south about 200 miles along the Mississippi River to Vicksburg, and east about 60 miles. And it's very flat there. And at one time, cotton was king. Now, all the Chinese there had these little grocery stores in these little farming towns. And that's how I grew up, in this little tiny grocery store. We sold everything: horse collars, animal traps, coal oil. Anybody know what coal oil is? Raise your hand if you know what coal oil is. Wow, lots of hands. Coal oil is kerosene. That's coal, C-O-A-L. We sell Carbide Lights. Anybody know what a Carbide light is? Hands. Wow, I'm impressed. Carbide Lights is what they wore on caps with a reflector instead of battery-operated lights. And they use some lye, L-Y-E, that was hooked onto their belt and put a little water in it. and it would generate some gas that would travel up to the reflector and had a little wheel there that you would strike a spark, and it would light up, and use that just like a flashlight. Anyway, we sold those kind of things. We sold things like sacks of flowers, canned goods, meats, grocery store, groceries, anything that somebody would buy in a farming town. And during the long, hot summer nights, the heat, the mosquitoes, and the loud blues music from all the juke joints would keep us up all night. And we lived in the back of the store. There was me, my mother, my little brother, my little sister. My father died when I was 6 years old. And my oldest sister, she was 22 years older than I was, but she and her family came to help us out. And at one time, there were 11 of us that lived in the back of that tiny 1,000 square foot store. And I like to tell everyone, there were so many of us that we had to sleep crossways on the bed. You know, if you lived in a large Chinese community like San Francisco, you could live there all your life and never learn how to speak English. But growing up in Mississippi was different. There were so few of us that we all had to blend in and become Mississippi rednecks, just like everybody else. Well, after graduating from Hollandale High School in 1962, I went to Mississippi State University as a freshman and basically never left Starkville. You know, if you drive around Starkville, you would probably never notice MFJ. We don't have any fancy buildings or fancy signs, but MFJ makes more pieces of ham radio equipment than any other ham radio company in the world. We have about 2,000 different ham radio products, and over 90% are made right here in Starkville. Our products are sold in ham radio stores across the U.S. and around the world. We have distributors in over 35 countries, and 25% of our products are exported overseas. 92% are sold in ham radio stores. We're ham radio's largest advertiser, and we distribute many thousands of MFJ catalogs every year. We have 4 factory buildings in Starkville, and we have a sheet metal shop that has computer-controlled punch presses and bending machines for manufacturing our electronic enclosures. We have automated assembly of printed circuit boards using those tiny surface mount components. And we can place over 200 surface mount parts in the MFJ 259C antenna analyzer in less than a minute. We have automatic wave soldering that eliminates hand soldering and improves reliability. We have a machine shop that manufactures the metal and the plastic parts, and we manufacture many ham radio parts from scratch. Things like air variable capacitors, roller inductors, air wound coils. And by investing in automation, we can make most of our products less expensive in Starkville than we can buy them from China. And we made a deliberate choice to manufacture most of our products here in the U.S. in Starkville instead of going offshore to China. Well, how did MFJ start? Well, I knew early on that I was going to go into some kind of a business. And back in the 1950s, when I was growing up, nearly every family and every friend that I knew was in some kind of a business. And as a kid, I was always selling something, Christmas cards, magazines, just trading stuff. And I was fixing radios and record players and music amplifiers for the musicians that were playing the blues musics in the juke joints in Hollandale. And I was using these old used radio parts. I took out old radios that I got from my local TV repairman. Anyway, I just naturally saw myself being in business. And making ham radio products started from an idea when I was a graduate student at Mississippi State. I didn't have any money. And I was living in a tiny one-bedroom trailer. But it actually started when I was a Cub Scout in Hollandale. I built a World War II type foxhole crystal radio, and a crystal detector was a piece of pencil lead on an old rusty razor blade. Well, I never could get it to work, but at age 8, I knew I wanted to be an electrical engineer. I got my ham radio license in 1960 when I was 16 years old, and I learned to copy Morse code by listening to a home-built regenerative shortwave radio. I got a degree in electrical engineering from Mississippi State and a master's degree in electrical engineering from Georgia Tech. And then, with my brand new master's degree in electrical engineering, I went home and ran the family grocery store. My brother wanted to take off and travel for about 6 months. But that was where I got my MGS degree in business. MGS stands for Masters of Grocery Storing. When I was growing up, all I did was sweep the floors, put up the drinks, stock the shelves, wait on customers. But when I had to run the store by myself, I learned how to sell, how to buy, how to work with people, how to stay in business, how to cut meat. And I remember those huge 4 quarters of beef. They were so big, I couldn't pick them up. So I just dragged them across the floor. Cotton choppers would come in and buy lunch. And they would ask for 15 cents worth of cheese, a package of crackers, and an RC Cola. And I couldn't always hand cut exactly 15 cents worth. So I would ask the customer, is 17 cents okay? And they would always say no. So I just take a bite off the cheese. Well, I had a great time running the business. I learned a lot, and I doubled the sales by the time my brother came back in 6 months. And when my brother came back, I spent a year working in Illinois and Indiana designing military electronics for the Vietnam War. Well, one evening while I was working in Illinois, I got a call from a professor at Mississippi State University. He asked me if I wanted to come back and work on a PhD degree. He had some money for me. Well, I didn't really want to work on a PhD, but I did want to come back home to Mississippi, so I went back to Starkville. And I finished all the PhD coursework in the first 3 semesters. I was working full-time in the electronic engineering technology department. And I was teaching and working on an underwater research vehicle. And that was when I started MFJ. At first, I started an engineering design company, and I was designing and building electronic circuits for the research projects for the various departments at Mississippi State. It gets funner, that's F-U-N-E-R, and funner for me each time I take a sip of my water here. That was a long sip there. MFJ are my initials. So I'm going to name my little company MFJ Enterprises because I didn't want to use my name. just in case the company failed and ruined the family name. Whoops. I think that might have had something to do with that water I'm drinking. Well, after doing a few design projects, I figured out pretty quickly that all I could do was all I could do. I just couldn't get much bigger doing all the work by myself. And I figured that if I designed some products and have other people build them, I could get much bigger, much faster. I had been a ham radio operator since I was in high school, so I naturally wanted to build ham radio products. Well, ham rigs at that time, that was over 45 years ago, had either very poor filtering or they were very expensive. And I decided to build a Morse code filter kit for $9.95 and a single sideband filter kit for $12.95 using the new high-tech operational amplifiers. And these filters had to be hand-wired into a receiver or a transceiver. And I placed the first MFJ ad in Ham Radio magazine, and it was a tiny 2-inch by 2-inch ad, and it was just full of technical engineering jargon. And if I read that ad today, I wouldn't even understand it. But I sold over 5,000 of those filters in a couple of years with those tiny ads. Well, after the orders started trickling into my personal student, after the ad ran, the orders started trickling in to my personal student mailbox. And no one could ever find us on the map because our address was just a post office box at the university. I rented this broken down hotel room in downtown Starkville for $16 a month. That's 50 cents a day. And it was a room that couldn't be rented to anyone else because the plumbing didn't work and there was no furniture. It was in pretty sad shape. I was doing everything by myself: etching, drilling, stuffing, and soldering the PC boards, taking the orders, shipping the orders, writing the ads. Well, after a few months, the hotel manager ran me off. I was making too much racket and stinking up the place. When we first started selling assembled, wired, and tested filters, I used to take these little bags of parts to my class that I was teaching and ask if any of my students wanted to put these filters together for 25 cents a piece. Well, that was MFJ's first production line. And I used to see our local telephone repairman working around Starkville, and I would stop him and ask if I could have his old scrap telephone wire that was in the back of his pickup truck. Well, that's what we used to wire up the filters. And I had a friend who taught 8th grade, and he needed a project for his students. So his students took the scrap telephone wire, cut them to length, stripped the ends, and sorted them by length. Well, they were also part of MFJ's first production line. To mount the printed circuit boards in the cabinets, we just glued them in with F16 glue. F16 glue is that brown gooey stuff used for gluing on wall paneling. Well, after a while, I figured out what my fellow hounds really wanted was a plug and play filter that was fully assembled and ready to use in a cabinet. And I bought these nice painted aluminum cabinets from Radio Shack. Well, it wasn't long before we bought all the little aluminum cabinets that Radio Shack had in the entire country. There were no more, and we couldn't get any more. So I found someone locally to cut up and bend up little aluminum sheets so we could make our own cabinets. And I bought a spray paint machine from Sears and Roebuck. And we stood outside in front of our little 50-foot trailer wearing these old World War II gas masks. And we spray painted the aluminum cabinets. Pretty soon, all the cars parked around us started looking like the color of our cabinets. Well, a major problem was how to put these nice clean hose in the aluminum cabinet for the switches, the phone jacks, and the terminal strips. And to punch a hole, well, I went to our local tool and die shop and had them build a punch and die set for making the hose. It was 2 half-inch thick steel plates separated about 1/10 of an inch, and they had a hole pattern for the switches and the jacks. And to punch a hole, we slid a metal cabinet in and dropped in the hardened punch, and then took a hammer and hit it really hard, and it punched out a really nice clean hole. And that cabinet had 11 holes, so we had to swing that hammer 11 times. And I hired one of my students, and his whole purpose in life was to swing that hammer all day long. Well, that was MFJ's first punch press. I didn't have a car that ran good enough to make it to the Hamfest. So I would invite students to go along who had a Hamfest. And sometime I would go back to Hollandale and borrow my brother's car. You know, it's a wonder that I ever got married. My girlfriend taught 9th grade. And before we were married, I borrowed her brand new car to pull a huge U-Haul trailer full of MFJ products to the Dayton Hamvention. I burned out her transmission. She never let me borrow it again. Well, after teaching classes on Thursday, I would drive all night to the Dayton Hamvention. That way, I didn't have to pay for a hotel room. Then Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I would set up, sell, break down, and then I would drive back all night Sunday, just in time to give my 8 o'clock lecture the next morning. I spent the summer of 1974 with some students that I hired and designed, tooled up, and got into production 7 more products. We placed our first full-time ad in QST magazine that September. And 2 years later, we added a new antenna tuner and a new toll-free telephone line, and so more in that November than in the entire previous year. We grew from 6 employees to over 30 in a few months. And I bought an old skating rink in Starkville and moved in. And I finally quit teaching at Mississippi State when we had 30 employees. Well, I never got around to doing a dissertation, so I never got the PhD degree. Well, that's how MFJ started. And now, 48 years later, instead of 2 products, we now have over 2,000 different ham radio products. Instead of a hammer, we now have computer-controlled punch presses. Instead of handing a bag full of parts to students, we have automated PC board assembly where hundreds of surface mount parts can be placed in seconds. Instead of a tiny 2-inch by 2-inch ad, we're ham radio's largest advertiser. We manufacture more pieces of ham radio equipment than any other ham radio company in the world. 92% of our sales go through ham radio stores, and 25% of our sales are exported to over 35 countries. 25% of our employees that were with us 30 years ago are still with us. 41% of our employees have been with us for over 10 years. 20% of our employees have been with us for over 20 years. And we have 6 employees who have been with us for over 35 years. Thank you. I appreciate y'all inviting me.
All right. Thank you very much. That was a great story.
Wonderful.
Series of stories.
Well,
I wanted to open it up to the group. Let's see if we can do this without having to mute all the mics, which means keep your mic muted, and let's see if we can, one at a time, as best we can, ask Mr. Jew some questions. Who will go first? Go ahead. Go ahead, sir.
No, ask anything you want, almost. I had to refill my water.
I have a question. Am I getting through?
Yeah,
We can.
that's Ed.
Am I getting through now?
Yeah, I can tell it's you,
Yeah,
Ed, because your audio's broken up.
Oh, gee. I don't know if it's the stream.
No, I can hear you
Favorite
good enough.
MFJ product you came up with?
Do what now?
Okay.
Favorite MFJ product that you designed?
Oh, the antenna analyzer. I was in my office, in my lab, which was behind my desk, one Sunday evening. This is 25, 30 years ago. And we had a bridge that would measure RF resistance. And I was trying to develop something that would just measure RF resistance without having to balance the bridge, to turn knobs and balance the bridge. And all of a sudden, it occurred to me, well, heck, what if I came up with something that would just read SWR directly just by turning a knob? And that was the beginning of the SWR analyzer. And that has always been my favorite product, because I remember as a kid, first of all, we didn't have SWR meters. And only thing that we knew how to do with a novice transmitter was to dip and load, 2 knobs on a transmitter. Back then we had a separate transmitter and separate receiver. You connected an antenna to it. There was no SWR meter, nothing. You just dip the plate current and load it up and dip it again. And finally, when SWR meters were available, you had to have a transmitter, transmit, and be connected to the antenna, or be out at the antenna. And with this antenna analyzer, you could just twist the knob until the SWR went down to the minimum, and you knew what frequency that you could operate on. Anyway, that was my favorite product.
This is Joe, KI5FJ.
Joe?
Yeah, sir, I wanted to thank you very much for you being in the marketplace there. I've got several of your products. You know, some of them last longer than others, and nothing's perfect in this world. But currently, I use your SDR switch and the noise canceller as a combiner, and the two antennas, and your passive pre-selector before it goes to my SDR radio. So all that's possible because you bothered to make that stuff. So I say thank you, sir.
Oh, Joe, you're the guys that we thank. Y'all are the guys that made all this possible and make ham radio great as it is. I appreciate y'all.
All right, other questions?
Let me mention something about what to Joe. you know, if you have one antenna and multiple SDR radios, and I'm sure you have one of the higher class ones, but you can buy them pretty inexpensive now, $15, $20, and you can cover lots of frequencies with that. But if you have several of those, you can connect several to one of our devices, and from, let's say, from one antenna, and feed all of them at the same time. Anyway, that was just a plug for one of our products.
Yes, sir. I understand. Yeah, I've got an inverted U, a terminated inverted U, and a inverted L, and I combined both of those in a receive mode for some form and fashion of diversity, and use your noise canceller as a combiner. I had a lot of success with your 1025 when I was in New Mexico, getting rid of power line noise. So I was a believer of it, but I had never really used it before as a combiner. But currently I use it as a combiner, and then because you know, the SDRs don't have any front end to them, I believe the passive pre-selector is kind of almost an imperative to the input of the SDR. So that's how I've got my system for receive here.
Well, you're pretty perceptive in that SDR needs some kind of selectivity in the front end of it. I know that a lot of y'all understood how the glass of water that I was drinking was making it so much more fun for me to be on here. And I would think that the guess that everyone had was that brown water that we have here in Mississippi. Not all of Mississippi water is brown, but I would guess that some of y'all who thought that brown water was Jack Daniels. But if that's what y'all thought, that would not have been right. What that is Maker's Mark.
Good choice.
Good idea.
Hey, Mike, you think to tell Mr. Jew about the drinking game that we developed the first night we talked about this, that when anybody said COVID, that you would have to take a drink? See, Joey's got it.
Absolutely. Yeah, we did that the very first night talking about this. And anytime you mention COVID or virus or something like that, everyone had to take a drink.
Hey, I want to be in that kind of a meeting.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Hey, I was going to ask real quick, and still enjoy this conversation as well. So the future of MFJ, do you have is their family in any way related besides these employees? They are your family too. But what does the future hold? It's a great company and a great story.
Okay. But let me make one comment first. My name is Martin, Martin, Martin.
Yes, sir, Martin.
Okay, great. We got that part straight now. Well, you know, everybody, they're always asking me, when are you going to retire? And I always tell them, well, you know, when people retire, what that means is they want to do what they want to do. Well, I'm already doing what I want to do. So I've always been retired. um, and I'm only 76 years old. So I'm going to be around for a long time. And I don't have any family that's involved with all of this, but that doesn't matter because I'm going to be still here.
Well, great. I mean, we don't want to see the product go away, and it's a great history. This has been a great story you've told us tonight. I'm glad you were able to share it with us.
Well, I appreciate that, Mike. Well, do y'all believe that I really am from Mississippi now?
Sounds like it.
Ask me anything y'all want.
Martin,
yeah, I'm here.
what's your largest selling product, most frequently sold product?
Well, it has been for a long time the antenna analyzer, but you know there's lots of them on the market now, and whenever you have something like that, people start to build them and copy them, make them better. But it's still a very good selling products. But our top 3 product lines are antenna analyzers, the manual tuners, the automatic tuners, and the whole line of antennas, things like G5RV, in-fed half-wave, off-center fed dipos. Those are the best-selling products. What do you think we should be making that y'all need?
What's your favorite antenna?
Okay. You know, the antenna that everybody kind of misunderstands, but it's such a super versatile antenna, works on all bands, very versatile, very efficient, is a doublet. It's just a center-fed dipole that can be almost any length. 102 feet is the length that we have it set for, but the secret to it is a balanced line, a ladder line, the 450 ohm ladder line. That has very low losses, but you have to use an antenna tuner. And if you use a wide range antenna tuner, like a manual tuner and some automatic tuners, it would tune every ham band, every frequency, unless the impedance is so high that it's outside the range of an antenna tuner. But if it can tune it, it's very low loss. Now, if you take an antenna like that, but you feed it with coax on some frequencies where the impedance is a super mismatch to the coax, you have lots of power loss. Well, that's not true with open wire line or 450 ohm ladder line. That is the universal ham radio antenna of all times. Just a dipole of any length. That will depend on the lowest frequency you want to operate on. 102 feet is a good compromise with 450 ohm ladder line into a balance line tuner would be the best. I mean, you can use a balun for some limited frequency range and it'll work okay. But a balance line with a balance antenna tuner is a universal antenna for all frequencies. That's absolutely my favorite antenna. The only disadvantage is you have to write down the settings for the knobs on the antenna tuner for the bands that you want to operate on, so you can get back to those bands real quick.
Martin, this is Joe, KI5FJ again.
Joe?
Yes, sir. I was a believer exactly like that. I've had all kinds of antennas. My first one I built was in 1961. And but right now I'm a believer that today's world of ferrites has allowed us to have the end-fed half wave, the 8010 version. I currently using one of your competitors' versions, but I see that you market that. And I think that's really the future, because you don't need to be center feeding anything, you know. And the end fed, I think, because of the toroids, the availability and the design stuff and all, is the way to go.
Okay. Well, let me say this. It really does not matter what you use for an antenna, because if you can get the RF energy into it, it will radiate. If you use a 6-foot piece of wire on 80 meters, if you can get 100 watts into it, all of it will radiate. Well, the problem is getting that power into it. You have to use an antenna tuner, and that's where the problem is. Or your losses will be in that antenna tuner. In-fed is how most of us old-timers got into it. And the old-timers probably remember you just took a piece of wire and stuck it into the center of the coax connector and just dip it and load it. I mean, you might get lots of RF all over your shack, where if you touch your microphone, you'll get bit, or it would get into your TV set back in the old days. But that's what we started with all the time. You don't have to use an in-fed half wave. You can just use a piece of wire. The secret is to match the impedance of that end of the piece of wire to your transmitter, so you can get energy into it. The advantage of an in-fed half wave is that you can use a transformer to transform the impedance of your transmitter to match your antenna, and it's resonant at each one of the harmonics, so you can operate multiple bands. Now, when you use a half wave and you use a transformer, you don't usually stick the end of that antenna right into your transmitter. You usually put that matching transformer out somewhere and run a piece of coax to your transmitter. Now, the SWR at the end of the coax that's connected to your transmitter is fairly low, but not always low enough. But the modern transceivers have antenna tuners that can match antennas of 3 to 1 or so SWR, and you can just push a button and the SWR would be fine for your transmitter. I know I'm answering the question you didn't ask, but if you ask your question again, maybe I can answer it.
Okay, very fine. No, it was very informative what you're saying. Is that I was trying to advocate for you upgrading from the old doublet, the Hertz antenna, to an end-fed, because one, you market it, and I kind of believe it fits a lot more situations than a center fed, but that's all that I was trying to put out there, is that I think that's the HF antenna of the future.
Well, and I understand what you're saying. It's easier to use. But you know, what a transmission line does is to get the power out of your transmitter to where you want it to go. And if you use something like a dipole, which I think is the best antenna that you can put up outside of something that's much better, which would be a Yagi. In other words, a dipole that's cut for the frequency that you want to operate on. Let's say you want to operate on 40 meters. So you put up a 40-meter dipole, and it's just a piece of wire about 67 feet or so. You feed in the center, and you can put that dipole up somewhere where it's out of the way and it's radiating, and stuff around it doesn't absorb the power that you want to get out to the other part of the world. Put it up high and get it away from the absorbing effects of the ground. Get it up high. Get it up high enough so the angle of radiation of that dipole is low, so it can travel much further before it bounces off the ionosphere. So when it gets back down to the ground, it's far off. I forgot what I was going to say. But anyway, you put a dipole up and you put it up high. I remember what I was going to say now. Anyway, the transmission line allows you to put that dipole wherever you want to. Even on an in-fed halfway dipole, you can put the in-fed where the RF goes into the antenna wherever you want to. And that's what the value of a transmission line is. The transmission line is the piece of coax that connects to your transmitter to the actual antenna. Or now the coax can have losses that you don't, lots of losses that you don't want if there's a mismatch there. But even if there isn't a mismatch, the lowest loss transmission line is a piece of balanced line, open wire line, or just plain old 450 ohm ladder line.
Well, and sir, Martin, it encourages me to see that antennas are also part of your vernacular, and that you seem to get excited when you talk about it. Thank you very much, sir.
Well, thank you for coming on and asking questions, and welcome questions from anybody, and whatever you ask. I may not give you the right answer, but I will give you an answer.
All right.
Hey,
Rick,
Martin.
go for it.
Hey, Martin. Hey, just wanted to say hi. My name's Tom Douglas, KB4PIX, and I just wanted to say this has been awesome. I've really enjoyed it. I feel like I've just had a chat here with Martin, and that is a beautiful thing. You mentioned your favorite product was the MFJ SWR analyzer, and this is an oldie, but this is a good one. It's been through many, many, many field days, and I tell you what, one of my favorite products too. So thank you. Really appreciate it, and enjoying your expertise, and just this kind of this nice chat has been fantastic. So thanks again. It's been a blast. Thanks.
Tom, you have just become one of my favorite ham radio operators. Hey, can I show y'all something?
Please.
Hey, before we go any further, I would just hold on. I just James River water. Benjamin KG4EIF has a question for you.
Benjamin, I'm going. Let's see. I hear this. Switch to okay. Wait a minute. It says speak. Okay, I'm switched to active filters speaker.
Excellent.
Okay. Hey, Benjamin.
Sure. as a designer and an engineer, how do you sort through all the ideas and the inspirations that I would presume come to you probably on a daily basis, if not more often, and decide what you're actually going to pursue and prototype and eventually try to take to market?
Okay. Well, first, I'm going to give you a smart A answer. We build every product that everybody has an idea for, but we really don't. I mean, we kind of be selective at it, but not that much. If it sounds like a good idea, then our best marketing, I forgot what that word is. The anyway, where you find out, what's going to sell. What's that called? The marketing. Well, whatever it's called, what we find is the best way to do it, just build it, see if it sells or not.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Martin, I've got a question. I've got a question for you.
Okay.
I'm a new ham, and I really don't know a lot of what I'm doing, but I'm having a blast. Okay, so I kind of got started into DXing like March timeframe, right, Mike? Something like that. And and I'm up to 70 countries and having a blast. And I always have trouble breaking through the pileups, right? And I'm thinking, well, maybe I just need a little more power, maybe. So I've been looking at your Ameritron linears, right? And I've got an ICOM 7300, and I keep thinking the only thing that worries me is I kind of flip band to band all the time, and I've got a fan dipole, so I can just flip band to band and be resonant all the time. And but with the linears, you got to have them on the right band. And I'm thinking, what if I buy that thing and I forget to switch the band? Have you thought about building one that switches automatically, that senses the band you're on and switches automatically?
Well, we have, and I can't remember if we already have that or not. We might even already have that.
I was looking on, I guess I was on DX Engineering's website rather than yours, and I didn't see it on the Ameritrons.
This is Joe KI5FJ. The ALS 600 that sits here, it does have that remote feature that you can hook right to the back of most newer radios, and it senses the band that you want to operate on, and it prevents the amplifier from being on the wrong band. But a solid state amplifier today, after being first in radio since 1960s, I got to tell you, that's the most convenient thing anybody ever designed. There's no loading and tuning and things like that, so some of the fun is gone. But also the newer, take a look at the ALS 600 and its remote function there. That's my input.
Oh, thanks, Joe. I'm glad you're in your ham shack.
Yeah, Roger. Yeah, I got quite a few of your products around here. Can I input just a little bit of criticism?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know if back in the early days of manufacturing, everybody used Loctite. Are you familiar with that liquid Loctite?
Yeah, we should be using that. If we're not using that, then I need to get on to some people.
Well, it's not the first time, and it's just happened with the most recent products that I got, the passive pre-selector and the signal noise enhancer, that the SO239 screws were loose, and it's due to vibration, I'm sure, and shipping and all. But I didn't see a lock washer and or Loctite, and one or the other would probably be a good investment, I think.
Absolutely. Every nut needs a lock washer and lock lock, help me finish that.
Loctite.
Light
It was-
tight.
yeah,
Lock
it-
tight. Yeah.
Tight, yeah.
Every nut should have a washer and Loctite. And if they didn't put it on there, then they didn't do what we asked them to do. And I need to check that out.
Yeah, it was a small inconvenience versus the quality of the product, I thought, and the usefulness of it. But listen, one other bit of not criticism / thoughts for the future.
Okay.
Don't let any of your engineers put any RF component in a plastic box.
Okay.
Your SDR switch, goes in line with up to maybe 100 watts of RF, and it's in a plastic box.
Uh-huh.
And the problem I have is that my antenna is only 50 feet away from the shack, and so I have radiated power in the shack, and that little plastic box picks it up just as well as the coax does.
I
So,
see.
yeah, and so I had to shield mine with aluminum foil tape because somebody wanted to save a few dollars and put it in a plastic box. But
I see.
I was very surprised that of all the products that I got from you, that was the first one in a plastic box. So take a look at that SDR switch.
I will sure take a look at that, and I appreciate the comments, and that's the reason we bought all those computer control punch presses, so we can put stuff in metal. I would look at that. Thanks.
Hey, real quick, we're going to go to some other questions. And before I lose too many people, but hold on, before we do that, I just need to take a sip of my water. By the way, every time I hear MFJ tonight, I'm taking a sip. Look, if you guys, go ahead.
You got brown water just like we got down here.
Yep, we have that in Virginia. If you guys want to join our East Coast ham operators group, you can do so either on Facebook, or you can send us an email to get on the mailing list, which is rvamike@me.com. That's rvamike@me.com. We'll add you to the list. And there are definitely some other people. Ed had a question. And Ed, I don't know if you want to try and come in. He wanted me to ask you, and I don't see what the question was. You want to try one more time, Ed?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Well enough. Go ahead. Go ahead.
All right. The question is, what was the dream project that just didn't work?
The dream project, what?
It didn't work.
The
It didn't work.
dream project that just didn't work.
Oh. Ed, that is a very good question. And there were so many of those that I can't tell you which one. Ed is a real people guy. Hey, Ed, we need to get together on the telephone, not over the air, because too many people would be listening to us.
Any other questions?
Hey, Mike, I saw Johnny N5XQK had to actually raise his hand.
Come on in, Johnny.
Is my audio coming through okay?
Yep.
Great.
Sounds like you're from Oklahoma, though.
Yeah, we don't ride horses out here and shoot bang bangs anymore. We don't do that. We're almost in the big time now. Anyway, my question is, are you having a run on power supplies? Come across one of the nets last night that there's been a shortage of power supplies and everybody seems to be out of them. I'm just kind of wondering if you guys are having a shortage.
Well, there may be certain models that might not be available, but we've got so many power supplies, I don't see how we can have a shortage.
I don't know. That was just something that come across on one of the nets last night, and then I had another guy come in later on and kind of confirmed it. He'd been trying to order one, a particular model, but anyway, I run a little thing called Ham Rescue. We're on Facebook under Ham Rescue Against My Call, N5X UK, and I have had found that I have needed more than one analyzer, so I've got two of the 269 Pros, and
Well,
I
thanks.
use them constantly.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Two's a great number.
It works for me. Anyway, that's my question there. I'll turn it back over to Mike. Thank you, Mr. Q. N5X.
Martin.
All right, thank you, Martin.
Any other questions for Martin?
Johnny, there's a technical term for a inductor made out of toilet paper that's probably causing these shortages on the power supplies. I'll just step away at that.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you for being with us.
Oh man, I appreciate it, John.
Gotta go.
I have really enjoyed visiting with all of you guys. I mean, y'all are great guys.
You have a lady, you have a YL's got a question over here. It's Cat N4WLC.
Hi, it's actually me. I'm November 4, Juliet Delta, India. And I just wanted to say that when you were speaking about your life, that was awesome. You're a great orator, but I also love biographies. And you just told it in a very interesting, friendly, like one-on-one. It felt like, I was sitting with you in the same room and we were just chatting. It was a wonderful story. I truly enjoyed it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. That was wonderful. I'm I mean, that was a wonderful comment. I really appreciate it. But you just have to understand that I grew up here in Mississippi, in the land of cotton, and listening, not by choice, but listening to blues music, trying to sleep. But thank you very much. That was so nice of you to say that. Well, tell me your name and call again.
My name is Judy, Juliet Uniform Delta India, and my call sign is November 4, Juliet Delta India, because these guys don't know how to spell Judy, so I had to make it really easy for them.
I understand, Judy. Thank you very much. Wow.
I'm listed in the QRZ, so there's a little write-up, but it has nothing to do really with radio.
Well, and I do understand that. N4 JDI for those people who don't understand what Judy is.
Oh, they truly know by now. Those of them who have seen me face to face, they know what this is all about.
Okay.
Martin, I wonder if there's any chance of a MFJ picnic if we're released from quarantine later in the summer, July or August.
Well, we can always organize something. I mean, if y'all want to do that, tell me when, how many, and we'll set it up. I mean, we have, I don't even know what we call it, but every 5 years we have like an open house where we open all the doors for 2 days and have tours and free lunch and everything. And let's see, when was, let's see, I forgot when it is. But anyway, I think in 2 years we're going to do it again. But if y'all want to come down and have a group that goes through everything, we can set up a picnic or whatever, take out to a restaurant or whatever y'all want to do.
We
Let me
have
know what you
restaurants.
want to do. We'll do it.
Does that include some of the brown water that you have tonight?
Well, we can sure make that available. We like brown water down here.
Well, thank you more than anything else for joining us tonight. So we've got hams that are joined from Maryland, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, here in Virginia, Oklahoma, Alabama, and this was just our first real event.
Wow.
We're hoping to bring more on as this thing takes off.
Well, y'all are doing a wonderful thing to get all these hams together and connect and just enjoy the fellowship of hams. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Martin, another quick question.
Okay.
Last year, Main Trading Company in Paris, Texas, canceled their what they call the Radio Days get together, kind of a one-day deal because MFJ couldn't make it down. You guys have plans to make it next October?
Oh, what's the question? Do we plan to make it to next October? Okay. Well, I don't know. We'll take a look at it. But, you know, you have to see, and you do this, I'm sure lots of people do this in everyday life. You have to see what you get out of the money that you spend. and that applies overall to all the ham fests and everything. And I'm not saying that the money that we spend by going to MTC isn't worth it. That was just a general comment. I mean, that's one of my favorite people and favorite companies. So just because we started a program to look at the money spent versus the benefits in a general way doesn't focus in on anybody.
It's
all right.
I know it's a hard decision like that. You kind of have to schedule things months and months and months in advance. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm just curious. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, Martin. Oh, go ahead. And we're going to try and wrap it up so he can get some rest. He's got to work early tomorrow, I bet. Go ahead.
Martin?
I'm here.
Martin, hi. This is Randy. Kilo
Hey, Randy.
November. Hey, Kilo November 4, Juliet Victor X-ray, coming to you from Virginia.
Kilo November 4.
Juliet. Victor X-ray.
Victor X-ray.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Randy.
I really enjoyed your living room chat. I feel like I'm in your living room with you, and I love it. Question for you, sir. Did you ever use your wonderful talents in the service of the United States, in military service? And the second question is, how is your CW today?
Oh, wow. 2 very deep questions. 2 points about the military. First, lesser point, when I was going to Mississippi State, we all had to be in ROTC for 2 years, which I was in. And the thing that I remember the most was you had to make sure your shoes were spit polished, your shirt and pants were ironed, all of that. And I used to kind of fake cleaning my rifle out. And there used to be little bits and pieces of grass in the stock of my rifle. So I used to get all these demerits, and I used to have to march them off. So ROTC, and I remember my lieutenant. He was a great guy, and I love the guy, but I wasn't a very good ROTC guy. Okay. Okay. And then before that, I had got drafted from Hollandale, Mississippi, got on a bus, went through the physical, and it was fine. This was right in the middle of the Vietnam War. And I was glad to serve. But when all of it was all done and through, the guy at the end of the line, I'm talking about the soldier guy, he said, look, man, you can't see and you can't hear, and we don't want you. So what could I do? Even if I was glad to do whatever they wanted me to do, they didn't want me. Judy, no, I'm sorry. Randy. Did I?
Yes, sir.
answer?
I'm here.
Okay.
You absolutely did.
Okay.
I understand that. My thing won't stay on non-mute. My dad was a Navy pilot during WW2, and my mom taught me to bounce a dime off of the tight sheets. We had to make the beds a certain way.
Wow.
So I totally understand what she worked for the Secretary of the Navy. I totally understand what you went through in the ROTC. And I have one of my dad's buddies was a radio man in the Navy, and he knew CW even when he died recently. He was in his 90s. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Can I tell you a little bit about my oldest sister?
Please do.
Okay, she was 22 years older than I was.
Mm-hmm.
Her husband, he lied to join the Navy. He was like 16 years old, 17 years old. He joined the Navy.
Wow.
And he used to say he was a fireman. And I used to, in my mind, think he was putting fire out. And I didn't understand what a fireman was. He was a guy, this young kid that was calculating the trajectory of those big guns. He was in the Navy that was firing on other ships. He calculated they used tables and everything, but he calculated the trajectory of those shells that were hit those other ships. But he was my sister's husband, my brother-in-law, who came to help us out when my dad died when he was 6 years old. And I'm a big World War II fan. I read everything there is about World War II. I know everything there is to know about B-17s, B-29s, the F-51, the P-38s,
That's awesome. That is fabulous. You have to get to those air shows when they have those
I
UW2
get
air
to 'em.
shows.
I go to 'em every chance I get.
Me
Hey,
too.
Randy, you got to remember, I'm a young guy of
I know
76 years old.
you are. Okay, so how's your CW, Martin?
Okay. I have been a ham since 1960. What is that? That's wait a minute. 40, 50, 60 years old. Okay. I've been working on my CW for 60 years, and my dream, my goal is to be able to sit down and have a conversation and be able to talk to you just like we're talking now and be able to copy at the same time. Well, I hadn't made it yet, but I'm still working on it.
Good for you.
But I can copy solid 15 to 20 words a minute if I write it down. But I want to be conversational, and I keep working on it. And I listen to this stuff on YouTube when they send the 100 most common English words, so I can try to read it and recognize. I hadn't got there yet, but I can carry on a conversation solid 15, at least 15 words a minute, maybe 20 words a minute, but I wanted to get to the point where I'm talking to you because it truly is a language.
It is.
You know, people don't understand. You must be a CW person.
Well, I really want, I'm a new ham and I really want to learn it. I have on my phone this software called Morris Machine, and it's wonderful. You can use it anywhere and help you to memorize the code. It's wonderful. That's my goal, is to do what you're doing too.
Okay. Not for your benefit because you already understand this, but for everybody else. Morse code is truly a language because when we hear da, dit, T-H-E, those who are fluent in the language of Morse code don't hear a dash or dot. They don't even hear letters. They hear words. They hear da, dit. They hear that is the word the. It's a language. Just like when me and you are talking, you hear when I say the, you hear the whole word the. So when you really truly learn it as a language, that's what you hear. And I wish I was more verbal and understand languages, but I'm just a translator. And let me tell you what that means. When I hear the T, it comes out of my hand, my fingers, the pencil in my finger is the letter T. When I hear dit, it comes out of my fingers, my hand, the pencil, the letter H. And when I hear dit, it comes out as E. So I'm a translator. It goes into my ear and comes out of my pencil as T-H-E. I'm just a translator.
Perfect.
I'm not fluent in the language. And for that same reason, the only language that I can understand and read and talk in is English. I'm just no good at languages.
You'll get there. You keep on trying, Martin. Here's from my
Anybody
branch
else?
water to your branch water. Thank you, Martin.
Oh, wait, hold it up again. Let me see what color it is.
Here we go. It's brown. It's brown.
Okay. Well,
All
you're
right,
my
Martin.
kind of
This
ham.
is going in the gutter fast, guys. Anybody got any final questions for Martin?
I don't have a
I want
question for
everybody
Martin.
to know. Everybody know. The only cause that Martin has written down and his little notepad are
Is
for
Randy.
YLs. Has anybody, am I the only one who noted that? He get, every YL, he writes their call down. There's something fishy going on here. Anybody got any final questions for the gentleman before we let him get back to Friday?
This is Mark. I just want to thank you very, very, very much. Unfortunately, I have to leave, but thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate you, man.
Martin, I just want to tell you, I think you're really to be commended for your accomplishments to start out in that little Obunk place in Mississippi and to do what you've done and just look around you. This is just one expression, but you just look around at all of the hams you have helped in their hobby, and you are really, really appreciated. We all love you. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much. And I think you're talking about that 50 cents a day place.
And the guy who started it.
Actually, Martin, I've got a question. Is it possible to purchase a amplifier at your location in Starkville?
Absolutely. Come on down. You know.
Hey, Mike, road trip.
I'll go. Martin, we're gonna come and shake your hand, sir.
Hey, y'all come down. I'll buy you lunch, supper, and brown water.
I think Mike's the one that wants the brown water.
Okay.
Amen.
All
I'll bring my benchmark.
Anybody else got any questions? I don't hear anything. Martin, it's been an absolute pleasure. This was the first time, as you can tell, that we put this on, and I hope that you enjoyed yourself. We will bring you a replacement bottle of Maker's Mark. Actually, we'll bring you something from Virginia. I think there's a place that we will make a true road trip. So, anybody else tonight?
How about some Virginia moonshine?
Well, that's kind of what no. It's got to be legal, because the last thing we want to do is get stopped somewhere in South Carolina with mason jars and gallon jugs.
No, it's legal. They sell it at the ABC store here.
Well, Mike will have to go in, because I'm not much on that subject. So, anybody else? Last call.
Martin,
you can get
Martin, I've got
legal
another
stuff
question
in
for you.
Franklin County.
Martin, my question is
stuff in Franklin County, Virginia.
Oh, Ed's saying something. Go ahead, Ed.
I'm sorry to interrupt. As far as the moonshine, and they're working in Franklin County on getting it, distilling the legal stuff. Boone's Mill seems to be the center of attraction down there in Franklin County.
We'll see if we can't find them a representative sample of Virginia, maybe from a few counties. Some may have labels, some may not. Jim, I think you have the last question. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, Martin, what do you enjoy most about ham radio these days? Do you do DX or this 2-meter nets, or what do you enjoy doing? CW, what do you enjoy most?
I like CW, and I almost never get on single sideband because I can't talk good. But CW, I can't do CW good either. But I love CW. I have always loved CW. In fact, this past weekend, I got on CW. And the other thing I like about ham radio is to use primitive radio equipment and primitive antennas. Right now, the antenna that I'm using is inside my house. It's a 17-foot telescoping whip in the house with a counterpause, and the counterpause is a 6-foot whip with a loading coil that makes it resonate on 7 megahertz on 40 meters. and I'm making all kind of contacts running 20 watts, and I love it. I mean, you know, if you use 100 watts with a dipole or Yagi or kilowatt or full legal limit, you can talk to anybody you want to, anytime you want to. But put an antenna inside your house running low power, then you have a challenge. And that's ham radio.
Okay. Thank you.
Hey, I have really enjoyed tonight. I appreciate y'all doing this, and I just had a great time. Y'all all good guys, and I would like to invite everybody to come visit us. And we have lots of brown water here, and that stuff works, man.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. This has been a wonderful presentation. It really has. We enjoyed getting to know you. I feel we all got to really know Martin Jude tonight, Martin F. Jude. So thank you again.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that.